Assalamualaikum students. Hope you are all well. My name is Zainab Bukhari. Course title is English Poetry 18th to 19th Century. Program is BS Honors and MA English. Course code is ENGL3123. Today we discuss about Robert Browning, biography of Robert Browning, his writing style, and use of optimism in his work, how he uses optimistic approach in his work. He was born on May 7, 1812 in Camberwell, Surrey, a suburb of London. Robert had written his first poetry book by the age of 12, although this was destroyed by him as he found no publisher to publish it. He didn't like going to school, so he changed schools twice before finally quitting school and getting an education at home by a personal tutor covered by his father. Browning's family was devoted to his being a poet. Robert Browning had an interest in different languages and started learning Latin, Italian, Greek, and French. By the age of 14, he became fluent in all these languages. In his childhood, he admired Shelley's romantic poems along with other romantic poets. So, Robert started studying at University College of London, but after his first year, he quit that too. Robert's parents wanted him to get a formal job, but he different interest. So, till the age of 34, he was at home doing nothing but poetry. Now, the next point is Robert met Elizabeth Barrett, who was also a poet. He was 6 years younger than her. They married in 1846 and went to live in Italy. They were married secretly as Elizabeth's father didn't approve any of his children to marry. Her father said he shall disown anyone who shall marry. So when he found out, he did that. They had one son together named Robert Wiedemann Barrett Browning. He had not given in to frustration and obstinacy, and all of that account for the posthumous fame that he has got over the ages. Mind boggling syntax, his mastery over the words, dark humor, historical reference are some of the silent features that mark Robert Browning poetry. He began to attain popular success when he was in 50s. He decided to write poetry about a children's poem on a very different topics. He loves to write children poems and the children poetry. His claim to attention as a children's writer is more modest, resting as it does almost entirely on one person. The Piper of Hamelin included almost as an afterthought in Bells and Pomegranates. The Ring, his dramatic monologues, and the psycho-historical epic The Ring and the Book, 1868, a novel in verse, have published him as a major figure in the history of English poetry. Although the early part of Robert Browning's creative life was spent in comparative obscurity, he has come to regard it as one of the most important English poets of the Victorian period. Robert Browning enjoys the pinnacle of popularity only because of his prowess to portray his thoughts. His famous works was a Pauline, a fragment of a confession, which is a long poem composed in homage to P.B. Shelley, My Last Duchess, Porphyria Lover, Andrea del Sarto, A Grammarian Funeral, Man and Woman, are some of his popular works for which he is remembered even now. T.S. Eliot paid tribute to Browning as one of his literary fathers. if we discuss about the following World War II, however, Browning reputation has been slashed. Next, the point is major contribution to the canon of children's literature is the Pied Piper of Hamelin. His final work, Asolendo, published on the day he died. He died at his son's home in Venice, Italy on December 12, 1889. Now we will discuss about the writing style of the Robert Browning. So, Robert Browning writing style is totally unique. So first of all, we will discuss about his dramatic monologue. He is a Victorian era poet and a playwright. He is a master of dramatic monologue and psychological portraiture. His uh, his critical reputation rests mainly due to his dramatic monologues. It is a form of speech addressed to a silent listener. Its aim is character study or psychoanalysis. The poet may speak in self justification or in a mode of detached self explanation, contented, resigned, or remorseful. The character sketch of the speaker and even the other person involved in the event is clearly described. Moreover, the style of Robert Browning is complex, somehow difficult and overlong, as the dramatic monologues are always the long one. So the poems of Robert Browning are the difficult to understand, and they are so long to carry through mind. So what we think about us is uh, that he is a so difficult so difficult poet. As Oscar Wilde said, he is the most Shakespearean creature since Shakespeare. If Shakespeare could sing with myriad lips, Browning could stammer through 1,000 mouths. Yes, Browning was great, and as what will he be remembered as a poet? Ah, not as a poet. He will be remembered as a writer of fiction, as the most supreme writer of fiction it may be that we have ever had. His sense of the dramatic situation was unrevealed, and if he could not answer his problems, he could at least put problems forth. And what more should an artist do? Consider from the point of view of a creator of character, he ranks next to him who made Hamlet. Had he been articulate, he might have sat beside him. The only man who can touch the hem of his garment is George Matred. All of these had greatly contributed to the developing of Browning as the great poet he is known to be. He was actually the explorations of philosophical questions of great resonance in Victorian life. He has a lot of energy and a style who had roughness in his writings. So what the other anyone as widely adulterated as Browning was during the later years of his life is bound to suffer or decline in critical valuation. Along with other Victorians, Browning was dismissed by so, the point of multiple perspective on a single event means Robert Browning used the dramatic monologue technique. The dramatic monologue was from form allowed Browning to explore and probe the minds of specific characters in specific places struggling with specific sets of circumstances. In The Ring and the Book, Browning tells a suspenseful story of murder using multiple voices, which give multiple perspectives and multiple versions of the same story. Dramatic monologues allow readers to enter into the mind of various characters and to see an event from that character's perspective. Understanding the thoughts, feelings, and motivations of a character not only gives readers a sense of sympathy for the characters but also helps readers understand the multiplicity of perspectives that make up the truth. In effect, Browning's work reminds readers that the nature of truth or reality fluctuates depending on one's perspective or view of the situation. Multiple perspectives illustrate the idea that no one sensibility or perspective sees the whole story, and no two people see the same events in the same way. Browning further illustrated this idea by writing poems that work together as companion pieces, such as Fra Lippo Lippi and Andrea del Sarto. Poems such as these show how people with different characters respond differently to similar situations, as well as depict how a time, place, and scenario can cause people with similar personalities to develop or change quite dramatically. The next point, the purposes of art. It means Browning wrote many poems about artists and poets, including such dramatic monologues as Victor Hugo's 1855 and Fra Lippo Lippi. Frequently, Browning would begin by thinking about an artist, an artwork, or a type of art that he admired or disliked. Then he would speculate on the character or artistic philosophy that would lead to such a success or failure. His dramatic monologues about artists attempt to capture some of his philosophizing because his characters speculate on the purposes of art. For instance, the speaker of Prolipolipi proposes that art heightens our powers of observation and helps us notice things about our own life. According to some of these characters and poems, painting idealizes the beauty found in the real world, such as the radiance of a beloved smile. Sculpture and architecture can memorialize famous or important people, as in the Bishop Orders Storm at St. Braddock's Church, the poem written in 1845, and The Statue and the Bust, the poem written in 1855. But art also helps its creator to make a living, and it thus has a purpose as pecuniary as creative, an idea explored in Andrea del Sarto. There is always a relation between the art and the conventions or the morality. It means throughout his work, Browning tried to answer questions about an artist's responsibilities and to describe the relationship between art and morality. He questions whether artists had an obligation to be moral and whether artists should pass judgment on their characters and creation. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Browning populated his poems with evil people who commit crimes and sin ranging from hatred to murder. The dramatic monologue format allowed Browning to maintain a great distance between himself and his creation by channeling the voice of character. Browning could explore evil without actually being evil himself. His characters served as personae that let him adopt different traits and tell stories about horrible situations. He also discussed about the dramatic monologue format to maintain a great distance between himself and his creation. His characters served as a persona that let him adopt different traits and tell stories about horrible situations. In My Last Ditches, the speaker gets away with his wife's murder since neither his audience nor his creator judges or criticizes him. Instead, the responsibility of judging the character's morality is left to reader, who find the Duke of Ferrara because repugnant person even as he takes us on a tour of his art gallery. During Browning's lifetime, spiritualism was hugely popular. While it had many detractors, it had many defenders as well, including Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Robert Browning, however, believes spiritualism to be nothing more than a scheme conceived to con grieving people out of their money. He said that spiritualism is not a important thing. Browning is the self-confessed poet of the human soul. He said, "My stress lay on the incidents and the development of the soul. Little else in is worth study." Most of his poems are psychological analysis of the characters who speak. The characters speak out, telling us all about themselves, revealing their inner selves, their mind, feelings, attitudes, etc. Throughout my life, I have learned to love. Love is the summum bonum of my life, says Robert Browning in a letter to his friend. And what he says here constitutes the philosophy he wishes to advocate in all his poems. Browning's philosophy is optimistic, heartening, and cheering. He is a poet of hope, joy, faith, and immortality of soul, in invincibility of good, and supremacy of God. The best of his poems, The Last Ride Together, A Grammarian Funeral, Lipi, Porphyria Lover, etc., have been ample evidence of his philosophic outlook. There's a dramatic monologue Browning poems too in the Campagna sheds light on another fact of his philosophy of life, namely, an instant cannot be made eternal. Here, Browning holds just the opposite view, stressing the ever-fluctuating nature of human thoughts and feeling, including the moments of conception. In fact, Browning was fully aware of the wide and varied phases of passions and thoughts. He gives an expression, almost all of them, in his poetry. He can point the furious passion, the romantic love, the abnormal love, married love, and so on. In the chief interest is the exploration of the intricacy of every human situation. Thus, Browning poems are characterized by a remarkable insight into the subtleties of human nature, which Browning studies by an analysis of individual characters. The conflict in his monologues is not situational but psychic. Browning is thus a forerunner of psychoanalysis and the stream of consciousness technique, and the characters portrayed by Browning, be it he a lover in the Campagna or be it she the jilted lady in the laboratory, have become a vivid and life like they always seem to belong down to the earth reality. Robert Browning is a celebrated poet, and any critical adventure may appear reductive to his readers. Moreover, Browning humanism and psychological insight, as exemplified in his poetry, reveal a profound understanding of his fellow creature. However, and despite his surface ideal relationship with Elizabeth Barrett Browning, many of his poems reflect tremendous anxiety about man's sheer capacity for love. Browning seems to have trouble coming to terms with man and woman's essential otherness. The very thought of an unbridgeable gap between the two sexes appeared to torment him atrociously, as he deems it responsible for the lover's unsuccessful efforts to communicate with one another and the ensuing conflicts. So, now we will discuss about the use of optimism in Browning poetry. Robert Browning, was a cherished poet of the Victorian era. In those days, the Victorian period, people were very in pessimistic situation. Browning brings optimistic approach through his poetry. Browning was very optimistic about the existence of God. He celebrates God, the incarnate life, and the life of the spirit. He was the thinker of optimistic philosophy of life. He was very helpful about the struggle of human life. Browning's optimism finds the passion of joy. He He was optimist, and as an optimist, he is a moralist and a religion teacher holding a very distinct place among the writers of Victorian age. He is an uncompromising foe of scientific materialism. Robert Browning, a cherished poet of the Victorian era, has many of his poems filled with unbridled optimism. Browning is emphatically the poet, militant, and the prophet of struggling manhood. His words are like trumpet calls sounding in the vein of man's struggle, wafted back by winds and heard through the din of conflict by his mannered brethren who are obscurely fighting for good in the throng and crush of life, very aptly remarks a critic. Robert Browning's own line is, I find earth not grey but rosy, heaven not green but fear of you. Browning is very consistent thinker of optimistic philosophy of life. His optimism is based on life realities. Life is full of imperfections, but in this very imperfection lies hope, according to Browning philosophy. He does not challenge the old dogmas, he accepts the conventional view about the God, the immorality of soul, and the Christian belief in incarnation. He is hopeful about the struggle of human life. He says, persistent struggle gives meaning to life. The perfection of life resides not in accomplishment but in the strive to accomplish. In his poem Last Ride Together, Browning conceals to welcome each rebirth that turns our smoothness rough, each sting that ages not sit nor stand but go. Browning optimism is founded on the realities of life. It is not blind as he does not shut its eyes to the evil prevailing in daily life routine. He knows that human life is a mixture of good and evil, of love and the ugliness, of despair and hopefulness, but he derives hope from this very imperfection of life. Browning through going optimism naturally seems to imply a pessimistic view of the world. In the famous lines of Pippa Passes, he says, God in God is in his heaven, all is right with the world. Moreover, Browning tells us about the Browning tells us about the articulate Victorian optimism and belief in progress at a time when England had reached the pinnacle of prestige and power in the world, both for being the first country to leave full throttle into industrialism and through the inconsistent naval and military superiority established after the defeat of French in the Napoleonic Wars and maintained throughout the 19th century. Even in the area of religion, where Brownism was shaking other poets' faith in the divine order and the existence of God, Browning maintained a strong faith in conventional religious thinking and an afterlife. Examples of optimism in Browning poetry abound. In Robin Alfred, he celebrates both the incarnate life and the life of the spirit writing. As he says, let us cry, all good things are ours. In the more famous poem, Andrea del Sarto, he expresses an optimistic faith in progress and striving for achievement writing. He says, a man's reach should exceed his steps, or what's heaven for? Browning died at the end of 1889, while all still was, for his social class at least. In other words, and in words right with the world, he never experienced the carnage of the World War One or the way that the war shook the intellectual world's optimism and faith in human progress. He was a true spirit of optimism in the Browning's poetry. Moreover, Browning is an optimist, and as an optimist, he is a moralist and a religious teacher. He holds a very distinct place among the writers of the Victorian age. He is an uncompromising foe of scientific materialism. He preaches God and universality as the central truth of his philosophy of life. Victorian age is a watershed age in English literature, as there is the influence of classicism, Italian Renaissance, British Renaissance, individualism, socialism, Neoclassicism, Romanticism, Modernism, and Skepticism. Therefore, there are a lot of confusion and conflicts in this age. There are the conflicts between art and life, art and morality, content and form, man and woman, classic education and progressive education, flesh and spirit, body and soul, and whatnot. In this entire prevail situation, Browning remains unaffected by these confusion and conflicts. He is at heart an optimism is clear even in his style of writing, a poem that he always picks up his central character in crisis or in some critical situation, then this crisis reaches the climax and ultimately resolved, and he ended his poem with optimism. As in his poem Patriot into Traitor he said, "'Tis God shall repay one, I am safer so." As in Fra Lippi he says, "Don't fear me, there is the grave beginning, Zeus." Browning is a very consistent thinker of optimistic philosophy of life. His poetry has immense variety, but his unchanging philosophical view of human destiny gives unity to it. He does not challenge the old dogmas. He accepts the conventional view of God, the immortality of the soul, and the Christian belief in incarnation. Browning optimism is founded on the realities of life. It is not blind, as he does not shed his eyes to the evil prevailing in daily life routine. He knows that human life is a mixture of good and evil, of love and ugliness, of despair and hopefulness, but he derives hope from this very imperfection of life. His optimism is founded on imperfection of men. In the famous lines of Pippa Passes, he says, "God is in his heaven, all is right with the world." Browning believes that experience leads to enrichment. His attitude towards evil, pain, and misery is not merely abstract. He does not accept evil merely as a practical instrument of human advancement. His approach is pragmatic as it is based on the actual experience of life. He tests every theory on the touchstone of pragmatism. Browning believes that it is not achievement but a struggle that empowers in man's life. His optimism is based on his theory of evolution that life is constantly progressing to higher and higher levels. Man progresses in the moral and spiritual sense through persistent struggle against evil. He says that evil is our foe and no victory is possible over the foe. Evil is the opportunity offered to us by the divine power to advance spirituality. As he says, evil is therefore a way of man's moral progress. Browning believes that life is a preparation for the life to come. In abundant hope, the lover does not disappear as he derives consolation from the optimistic faith that God creates the love to reward the love. True love is sure to be rewarded in the life after death, if not in this life. Moreover, Browning's optimism is firmly based on his faith in the immortality of the soul. The body may die, but the soul lives on in the infinite. Life in the other world is far more valuable than life in this finite one. This ideal, which is attainable here, is worthless. For by attaining it here, we shall not deserve to attain it there in the next world. Browning believes in the futility of this worldly life. He thinks that failure serves as a source of inspiration for progress, as in Andrea Del Sarto. Ah, what a man! Reach should exceed his grasp, or what happened for. Drowning firm faith in God is beyond any doubt. He is never skeptical about the existence of God controlling the world. Even his navs have firm faith in God and rely upon His mercy. They constantly talk of their relation with God and are sure of their ultimate union with Him. It is love which harmonizes all living beings. It is a love that all Browning's characters build their faith, saying, God, through art love, I built my faith on that. Life in this world is worth living because both life and the world are the expression of divine love. The world is beautiful as God created it out of the fullness of His love. This world, no plot for us, not planned. It means intensely and means good. Browning optimism finds the passion of joy. No one has sung more fervently than Browning of the delight of life. David in Saul, Pippa in Pippa Passes, Lippo in Fra Lippo Lippi, and a host of other poems are nearly alive to the pleasure of living. The Rabbi in Rabbi Ben Zara, Ezra condemns the aesthetic negation of the flesh and asserts the necessity and moral usefulness of the flesh and the soul. As the bird wings and sings, let us try our good things. Our words, no soul helps flesh more, now than flesh helps soul. Browning speaks out the strongest words of optimistic faith in his Victorian age of skepticism and pessimism. Of all English poets, no other is so optimistic, so completely, so consciously, so basically a teacher of man as Browning. However, according to modern criticism, in certain cases, Browning optimism can be interpreted as false or hollow optimism. Sometimes it seems a justification of failure than optimism. It seems a hope against hope or a hope for the impossible. As an Andrea Del Sarto says, what would one have in heaven? Perhaps new chances, one more chance. As in Bishop or this storm, he says, old Gandalf at me from his onion stone as still he invites me, so fair she was. On another place, he says, I hope she would love me. Here we write. Again, at the end of this very poem, he says, the instant made eternity and heaven just proved that in, and she right together forever right. Despite all this, we call him as an optimistic because of his firm faith in the God. So, Browning's poetry covers the span of his lifetime, as he was not just a full-time poet but a lifeline poet. Now, I just summarized my lecture about telling the main or the key points of the Robert Browning. He was actually a man who was dedicated to poetry, who designed his life around the notion of being a poet. Therefore, in so brief an essay, one cannot present but an overview of the specimens expressing the poet's angst as regards love. Robert Browning was an optimistic poet who has an optimistic life, who loves his life with an optimistic approach. His poems are full of courage and inspiration, telling people that there are no difficulties if they have dependence and self-control. It was a good omen for English literature that the two leaders in poetry, Tennyson and Browning, differ from one another. Tennyson was at heart a pessimist, but Browning was at heart a strong optimistic approach. So, the last, the most important thing about the Robert Browning was the essential of Browning's dramatic monologue at the central speaker, a critical moment of dramatic situation, fervent spiritual experience, a silent listener, lyricism, images from nature and drug detection. In two, in the Campagna, the love is the speaker, in presence of his beloved who remains silent throughout the poem. Robert Browning wrote many poems who, who is characterized by a remarkable dramatic monologues. Browning told us about the true spirit of dramatic monologue. He tells us how to write a monologue in a true things. He gave the poetry a true situation of dramatic monologue. His actually some critics believe that Browning was a father of dramatic monologue. Moreover, the in his monologues, Browning constantly strikes a curiously modern note. Browning is often considered the master of the form of the dramatic monologue, if not the first to inaugurate to perfect this poetic form. In Browning's dramatic monologue, the speaker lay bare his inner thoughts and feelings. That is why they are regarded as the soul study. Browning admits the soul is the stage. Moods and thoughts are characters. He emphasizes majestically on the incidents and the development of a soul, little else is worth study. Well known for his expertise of dramatic monologue, Browning made a special feature of it in his work. The dramatic monologue verse form allowed Browning to explore and probe the minds of specific characters. This particular format allowed Browning to maintain a great distance between himself and his creation. Browning terrific monologues work as a tool to examine issues of the day that may not have examined otherwise. One of the best illustrations of Browning's psychological analysis can be seen in the depiction of the Duke in My Last Duchess. The dramatic monologue, The Bishop Orders His Storm, is another well accomplished work, notable both for its command of voice and its sharp psychological portrays. Another beautiful illustration of interior monologue is the soliloquy of the Spanish cloister, in which a Spellianistic monk grumbles against his fellow monk. On the whole, it can be safely said that Browning uses his dramatic monologue in the most peculiar and exemplary fashion to yield an unfamiliar and unheard of art product that was to glorify his legacy for generations to come. Robert Browning is considered to be the perfecter of the dramatic monologue, which had its heyday in the Victorian period. Other Victorian poets to produce one or more dramatic monologue includes Alfred Lord Tennyson, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Matthew Arnold, Bernard Gabriel Rossetti, Christiana Rossetti, and Algernon Charles. None, however, produced as many or as striking dramatic monologues as Robert Browning. A famous example is Browning's My Last Duchess. Others of The Ring and the Book, an epic length poem of 21,000 lines, is based on the documents from a Roman murder trial of 1698. Robert Browning, to conclude, Browning's business is to render the soul or psyche of his protagonist, and so he follows the same technique as the modern impressionist. With the help of technique of soul dissection, we clearly see the soul of the character. In his monologue, Browning constantly strikes a curiously modern note. In this period, every Englishman was suffering from a critical situation. Browning's dramatic monologue deals with the subject of failure. He takes a character who has been failed in his life. He is caught up in crisis and now tells a story of crisis and pours out his soul before us. Through this technique, he can actually show the optimistic approach from his writing. Robert Browning aspired to be a dramatist. He wrote 8 dramas and all of them failed on the stage. Browning's genius was contemplating than dramatic. Its main reason was that neither Browning was so mature for writing a drama nor was his audience. Browning made a practical compromise and decided to write the drama of the soul, that is actually the dramatic monologue. This drama is acted within the mind of character. It is not projected on the stage of a theatre. So Browning internalized the drama. Victorianism was an age of Renaissance. It was an age when British colonizers were being fooled. Browning wanted to present all this on the stage, but in this period of gloominess, it was not possible for him to stage a drama. Even the intellectuals were not allowed to write on critical issues of the country. Browning thought a very clever device and decided to write dramatic monologue. This was exactly the situation of the people, that they had a drama in their minds but they could not express it. So they were only talking to themselves. Browning did not directly write about England, rather he picked up the same situation of Italian Renaissance some 200 years earlier in Italy. At that time, Italy was passing through the same critical situation as it was in the England in Browning's time.